Today I want to talk about one of the most common problems we see out on the road, a flat tire. So I have a road bike here, and we're going to see how do you just change that tire when you get a flat. Before you pull off your tire, you're going to want to make sure you have a few important items to get yourself going. If you're out on the road, you're going to need a small pump. You're going to need an inner tube for your size tire. And then a unique item, which you may not have, are tire levers. These are going to help you pull the tire off of the rim. You only need one, but it's nice to have two just in case. So on road bikes, mountain bikes, it's really popular to have a quick release lever. And what that means is this lever, you just pull it 180 degrees and your wheel should fall right out. Sometimes you do have to undo the nut on the other side a couple turns, but it's not that hard. So we'll show you how. You pull the lever, and then you twist the nut on the other side, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So we'll give it a couple turns. And your tire falls right out. So let's go see how to take the tire off of the rim. Now you've taken your wheel off your bike. Now how do you take your tire off your rim? There's a few things you want to do first. This is called a Presto valve, most common on the skinnier type wheels. So you might have a little dust cap. You might have a little nut on there. And then you'll notice your Presto valve has a little nut at the bottom of the valve. You'll want to unscrew that, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. And then if your tire hasn't gone all the way flat, give it a press and let the remainder of the air out. Now, you'll want to grab your tire lever. You only need one, but two can be handy. So you want to push the tire in a little bit, and then take your lever, and with the curved side, scoop the tire out. Now, some tires can be tricky, and this is where a second lever comes in handy. So this lever has two little notches on each side, and what that does is grabs the nearby spoke, and then you can use your second tire lever to squeeze right next to it and follow all the way around the wheel. Now, I like to take my tire all the way off the rim. This way I can inspect the tire, this way I can inspect the rim, and then I can inspect the tube to see what kind of flat I've gotten. So you might just muscle it a little bit. Boom. And now you've taken your tire all the way off. And then you can take your tube out. So where you might want to start looking is to see where your puncture is. And for that, I like to check the tube. And what you're going to do is try to pump up your inner tube to see where you got your flat. So give it some air, and then try to listen around the inner tube. Maybe feel it with your hands and see if you can see where the air is coming out. Now, for example, this is where the top of the wheel was, where the inner tube was sitting. So I know that if the puncture is at the 3 o'clock position, I can come over to my wheel and check a good chunk of it on either side. Okay, maybe my rim tape was to one side or the other, exposing the rim below it. Or maybe you have a dent on the side of your rim that punctured the side wall of the inner tube. Also, what you can check is I like to have the logo of the tire situated at the valve. So this way, if I have the same thing, a puncture at the 3 o'clock position on the tire, I can go to the tire and do the same thing on the rim and check for maybe a thorn or some glass on the exterior, and the same thing on the interior. You can give it a good look to see if you have a thorn. Sometimes it can be tricky, so very lightly feel both sides of the tire with your fingers and also right down the middle, because it's most common that your thorn's going to be right down the middle. So once you've pulled out the thorn and you've decided that's the root cause of your puncture, now you've got to put an inner tube back in the tire. Voila! So now you've got your new inner tube. Let's throw it back in the wheel. So let's start with your tire. I like to get the tire halfway on the rim before I throw in the inner tube. So just starting from either side, just slowly work one side of the tire onto the rim. And it's important not to use your tire levers at this point moving forward, because the risk of puncturing the inner tube using the levers is pretty high. Now, grab your inner tube, slide the inner tube through the rim, and now what's really common is for the inner tube to be all twisted. You don't want that, because as soon as you go to pump up your inner tube, it's just going to pop. So make sure your inner tube is nice and flat, and then just slowly start going around and sticking the tube in, making sure that it doesn't get twisted. Okay. Now your inner tube's back on the rim. Now we have to seal the second lip of the tire back inside the rim. So what I like to do is start close to the valve and slowly use my fingers to push a little bit at a time all the way around. And I like to go until I end up at the very bottom, which is opposite of your valve. Now on road tires, it gets pretty tricky once you get to the top, and you end up having to muscle it. So now you see I've gotten pretty close to the top, and it's getting pretty difficult to muscle the tire back on. So I've got about a 6 to 8 inch section here that's pretty hard. It can be tempting to grab the lever and try to pry it through, but you don't want to do that. You just have to get some practice and you'll end up getting the finger strength. But just little by little, use your hands and your thumbs and twist the tire back. And eventually you'll be able to seat it. So now I like to go around and just pinch the tire around to make sure that the inner tube isn't squeezed between the tire and the rim. Now if you're out on the road and you got a puncture, now's where you use your mini pump. Attach your mini pump, and I like to give it a good 10 to 15 to 20 pumps before I recheck the alignment of the tire on the rim. And what you're going to make sure is that the lip of the tire is actually going to lock into the channel of your rim. So sometimes it's a good marker here, you can see the lettering. If your tire is still too far into the rim, you can see that the letters will be covered. But as soon as your tire is properly seated, it'll expand and you'll be able to read the whole word. If you're going to use these mini pumps, it can be tricky to get all the way back to the recommended PSI. Just do the best you can and limp it home. Don't go full speed and watch your corners. Then when you get home, you can put your tire back at the recommended tire pressure. We've got another video comparing tire pressures to tire width to body weight. Look us up for that. Now your wheel's at the recommended tire pressure. You want to go ahead and put your nut back on. You're going to want to tighten the little nut on your Presta valve all the way up. And then if you like, a little dust cover. And now you're ready to put your wheel back on your bike. Now you've got your tire all pumped up. Now you got to get it back on the bike. And my preferred method is to keep your bike on the ground, because the grooves that your quick releases are going to sit in naturally fall into place while it's on the ground. JP. So with your bike on the ground, let's put the wheel back on. You're going to want to make sure that your quick release is on the left side of your bike. This applies if you have normal caliper brakes, or basically if you don't have disc brakes. Put your wheel back over, align the grooves in your fork with your axle, and it should slide right into place. Now, it can be kind of tricky to get the tension on the quick release right. So what I like to do is close the quick release and give the nut on the other side a good turn. And tighten it all the way to finger tight. Open your quick release again and give another half a turn, maybe a quarter of a turn, and then try to close your quick release. Sometimes it's not enough. If you do it with one finger, it's too loose. Open your quick release again and give it another half a turn, then close your quick release. I had to use my palm, and that did it. So now you know you've got just the right amount of pressure on your quick release. Give it a quick spin. Make sure your brakes aren't rubbing, make sure your wheel's not wobbling, and this way you know that your wheel is nice and straight. And you've just changed your first flat. Now let's talk about removing the rear wheel. Most flats I get on the road unfortunately come from the rear wheel. And with it comes the mess of the derailleur and the chain, and it kind of puts a lot of people off. But don't worry, it's not that much more difficult than the front tire. So what you're going to want to do is put your chain in the outermost gear. That's going to be your highest gear or the smallest size chain ring. And this just makes aligning the rear tire on the bike once you've placed the inner tube much easier. So mine's already in the smallest gear, and just like the front, open your quick release, and you might have to give it a couple turns to get it to come loose. And once it drops loose, you'll notice that the chain is in the way, the derailleur is in the way, but it's not that bad. All you have to do is push your derailleur arm forward and bring it back, and it should drop right out. Voila. And then same thing. I like to put the tire back on the bike once the bike is on the ground. So let's do that. Alright, I've got my bike on the ground. I've replaced the inner tube in my rear tire. Now how do I put the tire back on the bike? Basically, just in reverse order. Slide your wheel in. Slide your axle inside the chain. And because we put our chain on the smallest gear before we took out the tire, now we want to put the chain on that same gear going in. And basically this is going to help align the rear wheel and get us right where we want to go. Make sure your axle is in the dropout on the front and in the back. And like in the front, I like to close my axle and give the nut on the opposite side a good twist all the way to finger tight. Release the lever and give it another half a turn. Give it a good squeeze. That was a little bit too easy. I was able to do it with one finger. So give it another quarter to half a turn and check it again. Much better. Now you've learned to replace the inner tubes on the front and the rear tire. So now you can get out and ride without so much worry. And remember, ride safe. One thing I always carry in my saddlebag is a patch kit. These are great for when you get multiple punctures out on the road. Maybe you're going on a really long ride. Maybe you run into somebody out on your ride and they have a flat. You may not carry the same inner tube, but you can give them a helping hand by giving them a patch. What they are is basically a little sticker. So you give the inner tube right around the puncture a little sanding. They come in a pack of 6, so you're bound to have more than enough when you go out on a ride. And they're pretty cheap. And if you don't use them, maybe somebody else might need some help.